on an incredibly narrow view of the human being as self-interested, utility-maximizing individuals. That's manifested in our hyper-consumerism, and it dismisses our capacities for cooperative action. To help set up our breakout discussions envisioning today, I want to pose two questions and then offer some ideas on the way forward. The first question, what do we value? What do we value? Who are we as human beings, and what gives us meaning? I commend the value statement from Judy Wicks, who along with our honored speaker, David Corton, co-founded the Business Alliance for Local Living Economies, or BALI, which was working to build practically local economies all around the country, and who, with the Sustainable Sound sister organization, Sustainable Connections in Bellingham, is providing a lot of leadership and practical guidance in this area. The second question posed for discussion is, why local? What are the virtues of local economy? How can an expanded local economy address the constellation of problems we face as a country, a people, a species? We need not dwell long on our problems. We know them too well. That knowledge hurts. Our economy is dependent on material growth, and we've overshot our limits, depleting natural capital and calling it income. Our corporate and financial systems drive this extraction and have created massive financial imbalances, income inequality, and high unemployment, which are likely to continue despite anemic recoveries. Our economics uses the wrong measures of success, fails to distinguish between wants and needs, lacks a working definition of sufficiency, and only measures and values money-based exchange. Yet prices at the core of the system do not reflect all costs. And those externality costs, they're killing us, they're overwhelming us, our biodiversity and climate balance. We are at peak oil, peak everything, really. Yes, we can get more fossil fuels, but only at tremendous environmental cost and a much lower ratio of energy returns on energy invested. Our national economic policies still grope to return us to normal, which is defined, of course, by profitability for financial institutions, to try to extend business as usual. But the truth is, there is no normal to return to. We're at a system change point and must be about the business of building the new economy with our new vision. We need to find the prosperous way down, the energy descent in the language of transition, which brings us to our work today. The solutions to our challenges are inherently local in many important dimensions. I want to approach this question, why local, in two ways, starting first with traditional but very creative community economic development models that work with a range of institutions, for-profit business, social business, nonprofit, cooperatives, community capital, the public sector. We can buy more local and gain the multiplier effects from increasing money circulation. Moreover, we can produce more locally, shrink our overextended supply chains, replace many things we import to our community with what we can produce here, which offers even greater multiplier effects. Institutional procurement policies can accelerate this. For example, our Olympia School District has an exemplary Farm to Schools program, which is worthy of replication. And in some communities, like Cleveland, large hospitals are assessing their purchasing practices and asking, what do we buy and what can we source locally from small and medium enterprises? And further, what do those enterprises need to grow? We can provide them business development services, even help set them up as worker cooperatives that have economic security as a founding mission, along with producing quality goods at a fair price. Community capital can also be further organized, and we have wonderful community capital organizations here in Olympia. Organized to finance the sustainability investment agenda, including efficiency and renewables, such as is being done by our own Thurston Energy, and funding land trusts and new institutions of ownership that create productivity and stability for the long haul. Our work can also engage our public institutions, such as the port and perhaps even a municipal utility. We can connect with Thurston Regional Planning Commission, who's developing plans to deal with an estimated 170,000 or 40% increase between now and 2040, and incorporate food sovereignty, food hubs, import substitution, institutional procurement for local production, small enterprise development, efficiency and renewables, community capital, and other initiatives into our local policies. The second approach I want to offer to the question, why local, is that local economics is about expanding the gift economy, what we can do for each other, and the value we can create through sharing. There's real economic value and happiness to be gained from exercising our capacities for cooperation. Our politics promotes blind economic growth to create jobs. A new local economic strategy can include an expanded view, reframing jobs to livelihoods. How can we meet our basic needs here together, directly, working in a range of community institutions, producing for use and sharing? One idea I like is the smart jitney, organized ride sharing using the latest enabling technologies. What would our economy look like with oil at $200 a barrel, or perhaps higher? It's a big and looming question. Would you be more inclined to share rides with gasoline at $10 a gallon? Ride sharing will reduce GDP the way we measure it now, but we'll save money, be more resource efficient, and make friends along the way. This is a great example of building social capital, creating value, getting to know, trust, and share with our neighbors. With Sustainable South Sound, would the folks involved in our local economics group stand up? Sasha, I didn't talk to you about this earlier, but Jamie, and is Marie here, and Linda, there's Jamie. There's a number of us, thank you, that have formed a local economic study group and roundtable to train ourselves to better articulate the values of a new economy. Our first readings were by Carl Polanyi, an economic anthropologist whose studies of primitive societies, meaning the bulk of our history, find that human societies have predominantly used gift-giving, reciprocity, redistribution, and sophisticated systems to organize their economy. Markets have long existed, but embedded within networks of social relations. Gain and profit were never key motivations, social standing ones. We have these capacities, and they are inherently used and developed locally, face-to-face. An economy built more on face-to-face, next slide please, interactions means greater accountability between us, where we temper our selfish impulses and manage our own externality effects rather than try to export them someplace else. And now we know there is no way. In our group, we're also currently reading a wonderful book called Sacred Economics, which provides lots of guidance on expanding gift economies and also provides a deep agenda for financial reform. We're envisioning how to build a sustainable economy in the South Sound. That's our ambition. The good news is we have an incredible and rich array of organizations in our community, some mature, some young and nascent, all with great potential to grow, create value, and be part of the solution. Some of them are listed here. And as a round table, we actually have a method to our work as a group. We aim to engage these organizations that are operating on local economy values and spin off practical actions to support them. What do they need to grow? For example, business planning for expanding community food processing facilities for small food producers. And finally, our work's based on the idea that calling out and articulating these values that organizations are acting on will strengthen them, weave us together, and build our movement. Caring for one another, caring for the planet, are the legitimate bases for economic policy and institutions, and will lead to our greater joy. I look forward to our work envisioning together today. It's going to be fun way ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And next up, talking to us about food security and land use is Kim Gaffi with Garden Raised Bounty. Some of you may know that as GRuB.
Is it working now? Yep. My name's Kim. Thanks for having me. And I know this, both inspiring, but also a lot of people. And so every person who spoke, of course, changed what I wanted to say. Not that I was truly all that prepared, because I also did some gardening yesterday. But so I think what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit of a story, just as a switch, and also to illustrate what I think our potential right now is around food. So I run an organization called GRuB, and our goal is we have a real mission statement, but really what I think we do is we just mix everything up in blenders and see what comes out. So for us, we think about education. We're like, okay, there's all of these kids in schools who are uninspired and struggling in schools. Awesome! That's great. So where can we point their energy in a way that'll improve the community? And so we work with teens who are dropping out and help them find themselves by working on a farm, growing food, and building gardens for low-income families. And so we like to think about kind of systems thinking. How do we address 2 issues at the same time, or 3 issues at the same time? And I think food really has that potential. Food isn't, all of us, everyone in this room is an expert on food. And so all of the youth in those schools are experts on food, and low-income families are really experts on food. They're able to they're able to feed their families on almost nothing. And so they really know what things cost. They really know the value of food. And I think sometimes we leave both youth and low-income families at the fringes of these conversations because we make assumptions that kids don't care and low-income families just don't have time to think about it. In my experience working with teens and low-income families, there's really no one who either cares more or knows more about how to make those decisions. They're just really struggling to make those decisions, either through lack of information or just being overwhelmed. But that's great. So we have all of these people. So we've stretched the rubber band so far with food. We're so far away from how we're supposed to be living that you know what happens when you stretch a rubber band? Like you create lots of dynamic tension, lots of energy. And so right now we're in a place with food where we've created so much energy in the system because we're totally not doing things right that there's nothing but opportunity. I mean, either we're gonna snap and that would be really exciting, I don't know what would happen, or we're about to like polarize back to what it really means to be human, which is to be an animal. And animals eat. I mean, it's not that complicated. And so I'm really excited to see what happens when you know, the rubber band comes back together, and I see that happening. And I'll tell you one quick story. So part of what GRuB does is we partner with families to turn them into home food producers. And so we build vegetable gardens in people's backyards, and we also partner to make community gardens and do other things. And there's one gentleman who lives out in Shelton, and he got a garden from us, and so we built him 3 raised beds. And he took those 3 raised beds and he and his wife started growing food like maniacs. Neither of them came from agriculture. They just started reading books and figuring it out. And so for 2 years he had those raised beds. And then his neighbors noticed that he had raised beds, and they were like, oh, where'd you get those raised beds? And so we built another garden a couple doors down. And then someone else said, you know, I have this field out back of my house. What if we just tilled that up? And another neighbor said, oh, I run a landscape company. Maybe I could bring my tiller over. And so then they started tilling that up. And then John, this original gardener, said, you know, I used to live in Alaska and I really miss being able to fish in a stream. What could I do to bring protein into my own house? And so he got chickens in his backyard. And then the other neighbor saw that he had chickens, so they got chickens in their backyard. And then pretty soon they have a lot of chickens in their backyard. And then pretty soon they're trying to figure out how to slaughter their chickens, which you actually can't do in your backyard. And so then they like secretly start slaughtering chickens in their backyard, and they find out how to do that. And now they're having little neighborhood meetings where they're like, how do we change the policy that has to do with slaughtering chickens so that we can have our own food sovereignty in our neighborhood and be able to produce our own food? So all of a sudden, this family is involved in policy thinking and thinking about that. And so I think the point is that food is really relevant to everyone, and it also is about our personal health. So gardening is about education, but gardening is about healthcare. So what if we thought of gardening as healthcare? I just had doctors over to GRuB 2 nights ago, and the conversation was gardening is healthcare. So what would that mean? And we have such cool docs in this town, so they were already all over it. But so we start talking about, so someone comes in for diabetes and you're writing them a prescription. What if the prescription's actually tokens to the farmer's market? What if the prescription is a voucher to come to GRuB to get a free vegetable garden? What if it's a calendar of all the cool cooking workshops that are going on with the co-op instead of just a medication to make their blood go faster through their veins so that it, you know, so what if we thought a little bit more holistically? And all of these doctors were like totally into it, and they were really thinking like, what if I had a garden right outside my waiting room so that as people are reading Time magazine, or worse, People magazine, you know, they're like, oh, someone's growing food, and then the doctor at the end of the visit walks people out to the waiting room and is like, so this is Brock kale, no, go ahead, try it. No, it's great. Oh, actually, it starts out back, let me give you a kale plant. So I think that there's so much potential for food for us to have fun as we transform the world. It's delicious. I was in the garden yesterday with my 4-year-old boy, and there is no way he would eat kale unless he saw it growing in my garden, which he does, and he eats like a cow. So he gets out down on all fours and literally eats it, like out with his hands. He doesn't pick it first. He mows it like a cow. And I think the more young people see food all around them, and so it's happening. We have beautiful school gardens. So Karen Ray is a treasure in our community. She put all this effort into the Lincoln School Garden. And then through conversations through a coalition called Hunger Free Thurston County, Robert at the food bank hired Karen to start running school gardens all over the county and helping people find resources for that. And so there's all of these connections that can happen. But the more kids see food and realize that food grows, do you know that a lot of kids don't know where food comes? You know that people don't know where food comes from. So kids think carrots grow in a plastic bag in the store. And so when they become an adult, what are they going to want to see in their communities to be sure there's food? More stores, right? Because that's where carrots come from. And plastic bags. I mean, if you didn't have plastic bags, you'd go hungry because the carrots are born in plastic bags. And so you need, you know, to have an electorate that's educated, you need people to know that carrots come from farms, or they're not going to preserve farmland. Why would you preserve farmland if you didn't know that's where food comes from? And literally a lot of young people don't know that farms is where food comes from. We study science in school, but we often study botany, or we study kind of native ecosystems, other things. A lot of times we don't study agriculture, and there's just that little piece that's missing. So I think there's lots of potential with food. I think Mahatma Gandhi once said something, and to get him right, I will look at my paper. He said, to forget how to dig the earth and to tend the soil is to forget ourselves. And I think that that's where we're at. We're at a time of remembering, and we're at a time of weaving. So this community is not in lack of amazing things going on around food, and TJ's gonna tell you about some of them. But what we do need is weaving together. We need system thinking. When we're addressing education, let's address food and waste management and transportation and healthcare all at the same time. Because they truly are one thing. We just have language has gotten in our way. So I encourage all of you to think of yourselves as weavers, because a lot of us are in the trenches doing the work, but what we need people is cross-pollinating. I need someone on my board who is also on TJ's board, so that our organizations are being cross-pollinated. Because there's so much incredible work, and I just want to see it woven together into a tapestry that'll uphold both our food security, but also our right to food, our food sovereignty. Thanks.
Thank you, Kim. And now we're going to hear from TJ Johnson. TJ is representing one of the granddaddy or grandmama organizations in the community, Sustainable South Sound. He's going to talk to us about the local food movement, which is a phenomenal success story.
Thanks, Joanne. It's kind of interesting when they asked me to talk this morning. We originally had this, my talk scheduled at a different place in the agenda, and it bounced around a lot, and then it wound up, because it's kind of different, I'm not laying out so much the challenges as some of these folks did, but more about what the solutions are. And so they said, well, let's do it at the end of the morning panel, and I said, fine, and that was before I knew I had to go right after Kim, who's just like so amazing, that I'm sitting over there going, oh gosh, what am I going to do to be as good as Kim? And I'm going to follow up on some of what she said, and I'm going to follow up a little bit on what John said about economics too. So I want to start with a question, because we've been in this dark room for a long time, and even though I know we all came here early today, did anybody have a chance to do anything agricultural this morning? Yeah. So actually, all of you should raise your hands, because did everybody eat something today? Yeah. Okay, so Wendell Berry says that eating is an agricultural act, and I point that out because we are all part, we make decisions every day, and we're all part of the local food movement because we eat, whether you know it or not. So you're deputized as of this moment, official members of the local food movement. I want to do kind of three things here. I want to talk about what a movement is, and a little bit about some of what's been happening locally, and then wrap up with next steps and some possibilities. So I was thinking, the title of this is The Local Food Movement, a Success Story, and I thought, well, geez, I need to know what a movement is first. So I did some looking, and what is a movement? So a movement is a group of people with a common ideology who work together to achieve certain goals. So I thought, are we really a movement? And I think we are. And I think the ideology that we all share is that the industrial food system is bad for the planet, it's bad for the community, and it's bad for our health, and that there's got to be a better alternative. So I think we have an ideology. So okay, we're probably there for a movement. So what are our goals? Well, I think the goals of our local movement here are to build an alternative system that provides enough food for everyone, which the current system doesn't do, retains wealth in the community, which the current system doesn't do, fosters social cohesion, which the current system doesn't do, and operates consistent with ecological processes, which the current system doesn't do. So we have some goals and we have an ideology, so I think we are a movement. So then I can move on to the second part of the charge, because now I know we're a movement. So what are some of the successes that have been happening here? And I will say that we've had some success, but this is by no means the end of the story. We are just in the very early stages of doing this work. And it's really a story that's continuing to unfold daily and over many years to come. And I thought it was interesting in the transition video we saw earlier that they said a lot of transition activities start from food. It's sort of the first place people start, and that's really been the case here in Thurston County. When we started meeting a couple years ago as the Alliance for Community Transition, it was pretty clear that food was going to be a part of this, and that some of our infrastructure building around food was a little bit ahead of everything else. So it's exactly as they were describing there. So I think we've had some successes. The first is the public awareness of this topic, that the importance of food is huge. Anybody that's been going to garden stores this spring will probably relate to some of these things. Seeds are flying off of the racks in all the local garden stores and at the co-op. And any place that sells seeds, it's hard for them to keep them in stock. I talked to the folks at one of our local farm stores recently, and they said they've never seen anything like this. So many people are buying chicks this year to raise backyard chickens. How many people here are chicken raisers or wannabe raisers? Okay, yeah, that's probably twice as much as it would have been 5 years ago, right? So that's happening. People looking for good potting soil and good quality seed starting mix, it's hard to find this year. As soon as they bring in a pallet of it, it's gone. So that's really exciting stuff. And then, of course, we see all of our local businesses, whether it's the co-op or the farmers market or CSAs through our local farms or local producers like Oli Kraut and others, their products are just, it's just nothing but up in terms of sales and people's interest in buying those products. So the public consciousness is there. That's awesome. That's step one. But we're talking about systemic change. So what have we been doing in the realm of trying to change the larger framework around these food issues? And when I say we, I'm talking from a perspective of Sustainable South Sound, the Alliance for Community Transition, and every other group and individual who's been a part of this stuff before. So let's go back to January of 2011. The Alliance, we talked about, so what would be a good idea to have kind of an initial kickoff meeting and bring some people together to talk about local food? And we planned this meeting, and it turned out that it was on a Monday night after Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, terrible, cold, rainy January evening. And we thought, maybe 50 people will come to the Unitarian Church to talk about this. And over 200 people came. And the people that came didn't just want to talk about it, they wanted to do something, which was super exciting. And for me, as an activist in this community many years, the most exciting part of that evening was I didn't know most of the people there. So it wasn't just the choir, it was new faces. So after that initial meeting, we launched some efforts last year to do some things. The first thing we did is we completed a community food assessment last spring. Now this is something that communities oftentimes spend tens of thousands of dollars in a year or two, and they hire consultants and whatever. We did one in this county for free, because we had no budget, with volunteers in 6 months, which shows you that people really cared enough to put time and effort into doing this. The other thing we did last year is that we brought people together to celebrate and plan for the future. So we planned and executed the Food Summit last fall, which I know many of you were at. First day of the Food Summit, we had 500 people come together to share a meal on the streets of downtown Olympia and to participate in a Food and Ag Expo at the Washington Center. And then that was followed up the next day with over 200 people who actually paid money to sit all day in a room and talk about the vision and strategy for our local food system. Pretty cool stuff. And as a result of that, things are happening in the community. We're in the early stages of many things, but a couple I'll mention. We're in the early stages of forming a food policy council, which would be a standing body composed of policymakers and interested citizens who could sort of be the central point for coordinating this food movement into the future. There's lots of things happening at neighborhood levels, and some of the people in this room are spearheading that, trying to organize neighborhoods around food production. And then there's also a really exciting effort underway to create a community processing kitchen to do value-added processing of local agricultural products, which was one of the big needs identified at the Food Summit. So it didn't end at the Food Summit, it began at the Food Summit, and this work continues forward. On the policy front, we were very active last year too. Both the cities of Tumwater and Lacey have adopted new urban agriculture ordinances that make it legal to do things like keep chickens and keep bees, to have backyard or front yard gardens, and actually to sell the produce from home and community gardens without business licenses and lots of bureaucratic red tape. So developing those local food economies at a very local level. We also just got the City of Olympia to pass a resolution in support of the Seattle Farm Bill principles, which is arguing for a different way of doing national food policy, and a similar resolution is in the works at the City of Lacey right now. Thurston County just got a grant to build community gardens as a result of wanting to be a part of this effort, and they've now convened a stakeholder meeting, and they're going to be building I think it's 5 new community gardens in the next 3 years here in Thurston County. We got involved with Thurston Regional Planning Council when they got the grant to do the Sustainable Thurston Plan. It didn't say anything about food, and some of us said, well, how do you have a sustainable community if you don't think about food? So we said, let's get food in there, and they said, okay. So we did that, and it became an element of this Sustainable Development Plan that's in the works. Now, I will say that I think we have some more work to do on that one, because as was mentioned earlier, the plan is to bring 170,000 more people into Thurston County by 2040. I look at that and I say that's going to mean that we need 23,000 acres of farmland to feed those people. So how are we going to ensure that these people coming in, let alone those of us here, have the ability to eat more local food if we don't really address that? And I think that's something we all need to be forward with in that planning process. And then finally, the last thing is, I think, the newest thing, and it's very exciting, and I want you all to get it on your calendars. On April 25th at 7 p.m. at Olympia City Hall, we're launching an effort to kick off a planning process in the City of Olympia for a new urban agriculture ordinance and/or program. And this is a very different way of doing things. Normally, the city would decide that they want a new ordinance, and they'd work on it, and then they'd bring it out to the community and say, what do you think of it? This is a collaborative planning process that from the beginning is co-facilitated by Sustainable South Sound and the City of Olympia, which we have really high hopes that we can come out of this with the most progressive urban agriculture ordinance in the country that doesn't just say it's okay to do these things, but actively promotes and puts the city in the position of supporting the development of a vibrant agricultural economy right here in the city. So many, many good things happening, more to come, and I would just ask you all to pay attention to this, get involved with it, and follow your passion through the remainder of the day here. If it's food, come talk with us about food. If it's water, talk with Nadine and the others, but find your place in this whole thing and let's move it forward. Thanks.
Thanks, TJ. So I promised a round of applause, and I just feel so grateful for these amazing folks, our speakers, what they've had to say to us today. I feel so charged up and inspired, and they're, you know, behind them, they're representing these tremendous things that are already happening in our community. So let's really tell them thank you in a big way. Okay, we're doing great. We're about 5 minutes behind schedule, which is nothing short of miraculous in these kinds of events. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just kind of lay out the next couple of hours really briefly. You've got your agendas. You've got a little map on the back. Some of our breakout sessions are going to be here in the Minnaert Center. Some of them are going to be across the way in that other building that has a different name that I don't know.
Building 20. It's on the back.
Building 20. Okay.
Building 20.
I think it's right out there. So the next up is refreshments and a break, and making some of those connections that we've all been talking about. You know, the threads that have been started to be woven here can continue out into the break. Then we're going to be meeting at 11:20 instead of 11:15, connecting to local challenges, our first breakout session. After that, at noon, we'll have lunch. So those of you that registered ahead and purchased the lunch that is being catered by Nineveh, one of our local new food producers in the community. She's, Lisa Davis has got a wonderful food cart down at the corner of Plum and 4th. If you haven't been there, you need to check it out. So lunch, and then there's also going to be some light food and snacks in the lobby, and possibly you brought your own lunch. And then at 1:25, we're going to be hearing from David Corton, Lessons from the Biosphere, Creating Connected, Resilient Communities, and that'll be back here. And then we'll kind of carry on from there. So there will be some moving back and forth. I predict that it may be a gorgeous sunny day out there. Don't look. Don't think about your garden. I promise I won't think about mine. Yeah, so then we'll see you back here for the keynote. Thank you.
Back already. Well, Gina still wants to borrow it.
Oh, yeah. Okay, that's fine. Didn't you use it?
Well, we used it on Monday, but she wanted to watch it again.
Oh, sure. Okay. Just watch the step. Try not to take a hit.